Story 1. The Plumber's Tale. Eggs in the pipes. I'm 38 years old, and I've been a plumber in Fargo, North Dakota, for nearly 2 decades. Most days are uneventful, fixing leaky faucets, thawing frozen pipes during brutal winters, or replacing water heaters. But one Easter Sunday, I received a call that would haunt me forever. It came from the city council itself, a report of strange smells and pooling water under an abandoned Victorian house on the outskirts of town. The house had belonged to an elderly woman who passed away 5 years earlier, leaving the property to decay. No one had lived there since. At first glance, it seemed like a routine plumbing issue, a busted sewer line or clogged drain. Still, something about the timing felt unsettling. Easter was supposed to be about renewal, hope. This didn't feel right. When I arrived at the address, the house looked as though it had been swallowed by time. Shutters hung askew. Paint peeled off the walls like shedding skin, and the steps leading up to the porch groaned underfoot. Yet, oddly enough, someone had placed a bright orange plastic pumpkin decoration beside the door, its grin wide and mocking. It stood out against the gray morning like a neon sign blinking wrong. The city had left the front door unlocked for me. Inside, the air was unnaturally cold despite the crisp spring weather outside. A musty odor clung to every surface, damp wood, mildew, and something sharper, almost metallic. My boots echoed through the empty hallways, each step sticking slightly to the warped floorboards. Wallpaper curled at the edges, flaking away like dead leaves. Paint chips fluttered to the ground when I opened the basement door. As I descended into the darkness, the temperature dropped further. Every creak of the stairs sounded deliberate, as if the house were alive and watching me. The basement was a mess, rusty tools scattered across the floor, crumbling bricks lining the walls, ancient shelves sagging under the weight of forgotten jars. But it was the pipes that caught my attention. Someone had torn them apart, and from the jagged metal emerged dozens of painted eggs, not plastic ones. These were real eggshells, fragile and hand-decorated. Some bore intricate designs, flowers, faces with hollow eyes, spiraling patterns. Others were painted jet black, devoid of any markings. I crouched closer, careful not to crush the delicate shells. Several were already cracked, revealing something brown and dry flaking away inside. One still carried the faint stench of rotten yolk, making my stomach churn. But most disturbing of all, more eggs were jammed deeper within the pipe, as though someone had forced them in deliberately. They weren't simply placed, they were packed tightly together, almost like insulation. "This isn't normal," I muttered aloud, backing away slowly. I reached for my phone to call the city inspector, but before I could dial, I heard a soft pop behind me. One of the eggs had collapsed under its own weight, a brittle snap, like dry twigs snapping beneath a boot. Against my better judgment, I turned to look. Inside the shattered shell lay something that didn't belong. Not yolk, not paint, but what appeared to be a small yellow tooth, worn down, bloody at the root, as if it had been pulled recently. My pulse quickened as I stepped back, heart pounding in my chest. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. I hadn't heard anything, but I felt it, an oppressive heaviness in the air, a presence lurking just beyond sight. From the far corner of the room came a faint scraping sound, slow and deliberate, like nails dragging across brick. I turned off my flashlight, holding my breath, then clicked it back on. Nothing moved. Yet the atmosphere had shifted. It was heavier, wrong. I wanted to call out to demand answers, but my throat tightened, refusing to form words. Instead, I backed toward the stairs, one cautious step at a time. Each creak of the wooden steps made my spine stiffen. When I finally reached the main floor, I slammed the door shut and locked it behind me. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe, listening intently for any signs of pursuit. There was nothing. No running footsteps, no angry shouts, just silence. But then, from behind the door came a soft tap. Once, then again. It wasn't random. It was rhythmic, like someone tapping in a pattern, trying to send a message. That's when I bolted. I didn't stop until I was safely inside my truck, doors locked, engine roaring to life. Even then, I refused to look back at the house. As I sped away, I couldn't shake the image of the figure crouched low behind the furnace, knees drawn to its chest, arms wrapped tightly around itself. Its face remained hidden, but I could feel its gaze boring into me, watching silently. 2 days later, the city sent a crew to investigate. I declined to return, citing personal reasons. They told me nothing unusual was found. The eggs were gone, the pipes clear, the house as empty as ever. But a week later, I received another call, this time from a nearby residence. The homeowner reported foul odors emanating from their bathtub and slow drainage. Reluctantly, I agreed to take the job, desperate for the paycheck. The house was newer, nothing like the first. But when I opened the pipes beneath the tub, my blood ran cold. More eggs. Dozens of them. Same painted patterns. Same hollow, polished shells. This time, I didn't touch them. I closed the panel, gathered my tools, and left without explanation. Since then, I've avoided taking calls from that neighborhood altogether. Strange smells, slow drains, colored liquids seeping from old fixtures. People describe these issues differently, but I know better. Every Easter now, I leave town. Doesn't matter where, I just go. If I ever see one of those black painted eggs again, I'll burn my tools, move out of state, change my name if I have to, because whoever or whatever put them there isn't decorating for a holiday. It's trying to get out. Story 2. The truckers encounter, the rabbit suits. For 6 years, I've driven long-haul routes across the country, navigating desolate highways, and endless stretches of open road. But nothing prepared me for what happened one Easter night near Casper, Wyoming. It was around 2 a.m., and I was hauling a load of construction materials from Salt Lake City to Billings. The highway cut through miles of barren landscape, dotted only by sagebrush and the occasional tumbleweed. The radio played softly in the background, filling the cab with staticky tunes. I wasn't tired. I just refilled my thermos with coffee, but something about the emptiness made me uneasy. Then I saw it, ahead on the shoulder. A tall figure stood motionless, dressed in a costume. At first, I thought it might be a hitchhiker or someone stranded, but as I approached, the silhouette grew stranger. It wore a dingy white rabbit suit, oversized ears flopping limply, pink fabric stretched across its belly. The head tilted forward unnaturally, obscuring any hint of a face. Black voids stared back at me where eyes should have been. I slowed down as I passed, unable to tear my gaze away. The suit didn't fit quite right. It hung loosely, limbs too long, posture too rigid. It didn't wave or react to my truck speeding by. It just stood there, twitching slightly, as if waiting. 5 minutes later, I tried to dismiss it as a prankster or some local eccentric celebrating Easter early. But then I heard it, a faint tapping sound. At first, I assumed it was a rock stuck in the tire tread or something loose rattling around. But the noise wasn't coming from the road. It was inside the cab. I turned down the radio and listened closely. The tapping was soft but deliberate, like knuckles rapping against plastic. I glanced at the passenger door, then the dashboard, searching for the source. Nothing moved. Then I heard it again. Tap, 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 tap. My eyes darted to the sleeper area behind me. It was dark, but I kept it tidy, a mattress, duffel bag, and cooler. There shouldn't have been anything making noise. I flicked on the cabin light with trembling fingers, scanning the space, empty still, but the tapping persisted. And then it stopped, abruptly. Like whoever, or whatever, was doing it knew I was paying attention. I turned off the light and focused on the road, trying to calm my racing heart. Another 30 minutes passed without incident. The tapping didn't return, and I convinced myself it was just my imagination playing tricks. I pulled into a rest stop near a sign for Sheep Mountain. There were no other vehicles in sight, not even a car. The silence was deafening. I stepped out to stretch my legs, checking the tires and inspecting the trailer. Everything seemed fine. But as I leaned down to examine the middle axle, I noticed something odd, a smear of orange dye clinging to the metal, dry, chalky, pastel-colored. I hadn't driven through anything orange, hadn't hit any obstacles. My stomach churned as I touched it cautiously. The texture was wrong, too smooth, too artificial, like paint or dye, like Easter eggs. I climbed back into the cab, locked both doors, and drove off. Paranoia clawed at my mind, but I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe kids had vandalized my truck. Maybe it was harmless. But then I saw another figure standing on the median this time. Another rabbit suit. Different posture. This one raised a hand. Pointing directly at me, I sped up, glancing at my mirrors. But nothing followed. The road ahead stretched endlessly, bathed in moonlight. I passed a green sign that read Casper 15 miles. Relief washed over me briefly. But then the air pressure shifted like the calm before a storm. My ears popped slightly, and then came the sound. A single, deep thump from the back of the trailer. I didn't want to check. I really didn't, but I had to. I eased onto the shoulder, flipped on the hazards, and grabbed the flashlight I kept behind the seat. When I opened the door, the world was eerily silent. I stepped down, boots crunching gravel, and walked to the trailer. The latch was still sealed. No damage. No signs of tampering, but I felt eyes on me turning slowly. I shone the flashlight toward the brush lining the road. That's when I saw them, 3 figures, standing 20 feet away, all in Easter bunny suits. They didn't move, just stood there, watching one of their masks reflected the light. It had that cheap, glossy look, like something bought at a dollar store. But the mouth, it looked ripped open, wider than it should be. I didn't lock the latch again. I sprinted back to the cab, threw the door shut, and floored it. My heart thundered in my chest as I checked the mirrors repeatedly. Nothing followed me. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been marked. I made it into Casper and parked in a brightly lit truck stop lot. Other drivers milled about, engines humming, conversations carrying through the night air. Normalcy. Or so I hoped. I circled the truck, and this time, everything looked clean except for one thing. On the passenger side door, below the window, someone had wiped a small, egg-shaped smear in the dust, oval, about the size of a real egg, drawn with 2 fingers, a mark. I reported everything to the night manager, but he shrugged it off. Cameras only cover the pumps, he said dismissively. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line. They asked if I'd been drinking. I hadn't. No one believed me. Since then, I've avoided that route entirely. I still drive, just not through Casper. And every year around Easter, I start having trouble sleeping. I'll hear tapping sometimes, just once or twice, like a reminder, not loud, just enough to know it's them, that they remember me. Story 3, the solar salesman's nightmare, the egg ceremony. At 29, I worked for a solar energy company in Lubbock, Texas, going door to door to pitch energy-efficient solutions. Most days were monotonous, knocking on countless doors, enduring rejection after rejection. But one Easter afternoon, I found myself in a quiet suburban neighborhood, hoping to make up for lost sales. The streets were deserted, except for the occasional sprinkler clicking on and off. Houses displayed Easter decorations, plastic skeletons, carved pumpkins, spider webs strung across porches. The air smelled faintly of wet grass, and something sweet, almost like candy corn around dusk. I approached a modest home with a pale yellow door and neatly trimmed hedges. There were no decorations outside, no mailbox, just cleanliness that felt almost clinical. I knocked, expecting silence, but the door opened immediately. A woman in her 60s greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, her expression too wide, too eager. "You're just in time," she said before I could introduce myself. "We're starting the egg ceremony." I blinked, unsure how to respond. She ushered me inside as though it were settled. The living room was spotless, almost sterile. A long table held baskets of decorated eggs, each painted with strange symbols. Spirals, jagged lines, realistic eyes. Realistic eyes. "Take off your shoes," the woman instructed quietly. I obeyed, feeling increasingly uneasy. 10 others stood in the room, all dressed in muted autumn colors, even the men. No one questioned my presence. They simply shuffled aside to make space. An older man handed me a bowl filled with rolled-up slips of paper. Everyone watched as I chose one. Unrolling it, I read the word. "Shell." The group hummed softly, pleased. A child handed me an egg matching the red spiral symbol on my slip of paper. "Hold it in both hands," the woman commanded. "Don't drop it." The humming grew louder, discordant. Shadows danced unnaturally along the walls. The egg warmed in my palms. When the lights went out, candles illuminated the room. Someone whispered behind me, "Crack it." I tapped the egg gently. Instead of yolk, a small black cloth fell out, stitched with red thread in the same spiral design. Everyone clapped softly. "It's done now," the woman said flatly. I backed toward the door, heart racing. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows. Through the blinds, a girl stared at me silently. Later, I discovered a new entry on my phone calendar. "Shell opens, set for 3 days hence." I deleted it, but the unease lingered. That night, I heard humming not outside, not inside, but somewhere between. Like it came from the walls days later, welts appeared on my body, tiny crescent moons. They multiplied, forming clusters. One split open, revealing something black and brittle. I flushed it without examining it further. When I returned to the neighborhood, the house looked abandoned. Overgrown grass, shutters closed. Yet on the door remained a faded paper egg, marked with the red spiral. Back home, the spiral reappeared carved into the condensation on my bathroom mirror. Something followed me. Something opened now. Every year around Easter, the hum returns. I avoid mirrors because sometimes my reflection smiles when I don't. Rows of eggs appear in my dreams. Sometimes I hold one, whispering to it, "If you're invited to a ceremony and told it's harmless, leave. Don't stay for the egg. Don't listen to the chant. Whatever you do, don't let it inside you, because once the shell opens, it doesn't close."